Was both complimentary and rude. Before we begin proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional landowners on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. As we share knowledge today, may we also pay respects to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. Thank you everyone today again for joining us for the Studio Women's Network. One quick announcement, unfortunately Alison Reid from Equal Reality was unwell and is not able to speak with us this evening, but we have another amazing resident of the studio, Kate Armstrong Smith, who will be speaking this evening instead. Before we go any further tonight, I would like to bring up our CEO Chantal Albouchard to say a couple words and to welcome all of you.
Hi, and welcome to the Studio Women's Network. So if people don't know what the studio is an incubator. We are not a co-working space. We are a not-for-profit incubator, and our mission is to help startups and scale-ups be successful. And we are very focused around the creative industries and around media tech. And when we talk about media, we talk about content. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. And so we have, just to give you a bit of an overview, we launched 18 months ago in the Sydney Startup Hub in terms of our operations. We were established in November 2015. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to some of our, a board member that's here tonight, Linda Coker. Not yet Dr. Linda Coker, soon. So Linda Coker, our treasurer, and our non-executive directors very generously give their time to support the studio and their deep sector knowledge. Where am I with this? So why do we have the Studio Women's Network? Well, I knew in terms of the research that we don't have enough women engaging with entrepreneurial activity, and that's for a range of reasons, and some of them are really simple. You know, you have babies and you have mortgages and Sydney's really expensive and all those different things, but and also just that word tech startup, well, all that means is it's just technology. So we know that going into the future every business needs to have technology as part of the DNA. So that's what we're doing here, but we are bringing together creative and business and tech. And so every time we have a network event, we just look at a different focus within the creative and tech business. And tonight we've got some amazing speakers, and we're going to focus around VR and AR and holograms and games. And without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, Kate Armstrong Smith, who's a resident of the studio and who has an incredible startup called Omelia, and they are doing what I think of as breaking story. You know, they come from a deep knowledge and understanding of working in the film industry, and they've seen that linear storytelling is not where we're going now. We need to be able to tell stories in multiple story worlds, and these guys are like doing incredible work with having created sort of a methodology and an algorithm around how you actually can take a linear story into a multi-story world. Without further ado, I'd love to invite Kate Armstrong Smith to speak. Thanks.
Hi everyone. Hi, can you hear me? Hello. Hi, thank you Chantal, and just to pay my respects to the ancestors past and present who are here today as well, and thank them for being on this land. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Omelia, and spatial computing is the discussion today, and we are working in a space where we're trying to work out how do you tell stories in these new formats and these new spaces. So a bit of background about myself. I actually, if you asked me 20 years ago what I wanted to do with my life, I wanted to be a theatre producer. I come from a background in entertainment, and I fell in love with the theatre at a very young age and was really excited to work in the beautiful, black space where actors were creating amazing stories and connecting with audiences. And when I was very young, I fell in love with this amazing experience that happens between the performer and the audience. But thanks to innovation, that was not to be, because introduced the internet, came along with all the platforms, and the audience basically moved. And we've seen this extraordinary experience where for the past 20 years, we've had a content revolution, and this new space where people want to be is happening. So I went and followed the audience, and a few years ago, we discovered that new platforms were happening, VR, AR. Instead of just stories being told in a book or a movie, one format, like there may be 4 formats where stories are being told, there's an explosion happening at the moment of new formats. And so we asked, well, what is how do you tell stories in these new spaces? And we've kind of created technology to help do that. What we thought would be good to show you today, though, we have the pleasure of working with some of the most extraordinary new AR spatial computing companies especially in America. And we wanted to show you like a glimpse of what's actually happening in the world at the moment in spatial computing. So we've got a lovely video. I think maybe I've just skipped the first video though, and maybe we have done that. And yeah, this is a summary of what is happening right now at the moment with the entertainment industry.
Of you have asked how our latest real-time cinematic Rebirth was made, almost not believing that the technology has come to this point where photorealism is possible in real time. But we're here to tell you that finally, photorealism is now not only possible in real time and for games being made right now, but that when you use these cutting-edge real-time tools and assets, it's incredibly easy.
Puedo volver a empezar.
I believe mixed reality will define the next generation, and I believe we will actually all start to exist in it. And I think the challenge is to create a society that is acceptable to all of us to be a part of that everyday adventure idea, that everyone is taking part in some larger adventure.
Render keynote.
With Red Dead Redemption 2, Rockstar Games aims to create a living world that's not simply open, but deeper.
Come on, pretty boy.
More interactive and detailed than ever.
Pretty boy?
Combining action, storytelling,
We need to get those people warm and fed.
and gameplay in new ways.
But lately, there's actually been signs that motion capture technology is about to go up to a whole new level.
There's no real sets, there's no real animals, there's no motion capture, there's nothing but pixels.
At one point, they put some sort of virtual reality helmet on me.
The world is going to look as close to real as we can get to in a real-time engine.
Hello, I'm Siren, and I'm a digital human. I'm more than just a collection of fancy pixels. I'm actually being driven by a real human actress and her dynamic motion capture through Unreal Engine.
One of the things I look for as an investor is a shift in human behavior. People are starting to interact with virtual beings on Instagram. They're going to concerts with holograms. The world of entertainment is going to just flourish because of this. And we're just moments away from it.
Technology and storytelling are always going to be paired. Whether you go back to the cave and you use shadows from a fire, the first piece of technology, or you're talking about machine learning and voice processing and all of these things that are giving us the ability to do these magic tricks.
If you're working on machine learning, you might want to explore storytelling because it may not be obvious. You could be, at the forefront of a movement.
There's a whole community growing up that makes together machine learning engineers.
Arty, Superplastic, AI Foundation.
Little Michaela, Micah with Magic Leap, Lucy's Fable.
Basically a revolutionary change in how we consume entertainment. And so that's what makes it so exciting to be on the ground floor watching this stuff happen right now.
Don't move.
Now, what does this mean for storytelling? If we create an autonomous character that has a brain, has a memory, has emotions, the journey will not be a passive thing where you're an audience to a story. You will be a participant in a story. The next era will be defined by human cooperation with intelligent machines. We have to build computers that can understand us and we can understand them in an intuitive manner.
So what are you waiting for?
What? I mean, that's some futuristic, amazing, and we're now. It's not the future, it's now.
So that, I really like that video because that's a summary of what's going on now and what is defined as spatial computing, especially from the entertainment point of view. And so you saw there that there are virtual beings or beings who the most extraordinary graphic toolkits are being created by gaming companies like Epic Games and Unreal, and where they can actually construct entire spaces. At the beginning you saw footage which wasn't real. That was, it looks photoreal, but it's not. It's constructed. So spatial computing from entertainment's point of view is about creating these worlds in which we can then interact in. And the question we have, or the solutions we want to look at, is once you're in the world, how do you experience that world? What is the experience you have? We believe it's a narrative experience because humans experience everything narratively. We turn everything into story. So we're working with these companies to do to try and model and design those experiences so that you want to stay in those worlds. And with some things like virtual beings, how does a virtual being, if you actually have, you go into a space and you interact with them, how are they going to communicate with you? Well, we believe it's not programming to say something when you say something, but you create a cultural environment and context to why you're there both together, and that's how actually you're going to communicate. So that's kind of the work we're doing, and that's an example of, I hope I've kind of given a lovely overview on spatial computing from entertainment's point of view and what we've been seeing happening in the world today. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kate, for that amazing presentation. Those videos are stunning, absolutely stunning, and it's a really exciting world that we're going forwards with in technology. Just a quick overview as well of this evening. So our three wonderful keynote speakers will be talking. Then, as they're talking, I would like you all thinking of the questions you would like to ask them. Because at the end of all three presentations, we'll be asking the ladies to come up, and that is your opportunity, both on our live feed and here in the room, to ask them the questions you want to know, either about the technology or about their careers and how they've gotten to where they're at the moment. Without further ado, our next speaker this evening is Alex Young, founder and CEO of Omelia. Please come up.
Thank you, Claire. And thank you to the studio and Chantelle and everyone for having me tonight. It's really exciting. And I've seen some familiar faces in the crowd as well, and some new ones. So as Claire said, I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called OR. It stands for Augmented Web Experiences. And I think what Kate was saying about kind of content and where we're going with content creation and storytelling, we're very much on the other side. We're kind of seeing ourselves as providing technology to enable creative people to tell those stories and kind of create spatial realms, I guess. So a little bit about OR, and then I'll get into a bit of where I've come from over the last 20 years as well. So OR is a web-based SaaS platform, so a kind of software as a service platform that enables anyone really from primary school students to creatives to AR and VR agencies and digital agencies through to developers and kind of corporate teams to really quickly create AR and VR experiences that are completely web-based. So not on an app for download, but they can work on any device and kind of browser. So you can kind of think of us a bit as the glue or the engine that kind of does all of the grunt work to let people focus on that creative storytelling side. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I started back in 1994. So prior to that, I'd left school, I'd had a stint at uni doing fine arts, and I found that I didn't really fit in that world. So I went travelling, and I went travelling for about 6 years, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, and a lot of time skiing, which was awesome. But then I thought I should really kind of settle down. So I remember my dad had given me his old Mac when I got home, and I didn't know how to use it, but I started trying to figure it out, and then I thought there's got to be somewhere I can learn more about this. So I started looking for uni degrees, and there weren't any, and then I found Crow's Nest TAFE had a diploma in interactive multimedia, and I think there were 12 of us in our class, and 3 of them were female, and it was an awesome couple of years. And we got out of that course, and after 6 months, 2 of us had found jobs. There was absolutely nothing happening in the scene in Sydney, and at that time Crow's Nest was pretty much the most creative place to be as well. So I considered myself pretty lucky to be in that role. But I was in a, I was in a role where we were building e-learning, so for delivery on CD-ROMs, because back then we still had dial-up and it was impossible to deliver anything over the web. But the web actually really excited me, and I could see, or I hoped, that it was the future. So I spent a couple of years there, and I also realised at that time I thought I'd wanted to be a developer, but I realised I was pretty crap at that, and I should really stick to a more kind of the side on problem solving, innovation, and that kind of whole user experience side. And it gave me a really healthy respect for developers and what they do, and kind of formed a basis for working and collaborating with them throughout the rest of my career. So from there I got what I thought was the dream job. So I moved into a telco and was working on a bit of a skunkworks project at the time. We weren't allowed to tell anyone about it, but we were building basically an interactive TV platform for Australia, and we thought it was going to be the next big thing. And I'm talking about kind of ephemeral things. I think that was my most fleeting kind of ephemeral moment. So we built that from the ground up, and the really interesting thing was, even though broadcast was at its core, all of the interactive elements were web-based at that time, which was pretty extraordinary. So we prototyped, we pushed boundaries, we had a lot of freedom. We really were kind of sitting when no one else knew what we were doing and no one really questioned what we were doing, or so we thought. But then we got shut down because apparently we weren't doing anything really fun. We thought we were. So after that, I got moved into, I guess, a more mainstream role, and that was the web had kind of matured a lot. We were just introducing kind of 3G, then 4G into the realm, or actually 2G, sorry, and then 3G was just coming along, so we're excited by that. And I started managing the kind of user experience development and design teams at the telco, and after a few years there, I realised that I wasn't doing anything but managing people, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but that wasn't what I really wanted to do, so I wanted to get back into the web. And around that time, so that was about 2004, I got set up on a blind date with one of the people that also worked in the company, and it's not a random kind of dating side thread, but we ended up staying together and decided that we wanted to create our own things again and kind of have fun, and he'd come from a background, I guess, of really serial entrepreneurship. So we developed the world's first mobile payment system, PCI DSS compliant. So that was in 2006, and at that time we were well before Square. It was before the iPhone was released, and we were way, 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 way too early. So we kind of thought that, it was going to happen, but it wasn't going to happen for a few years. And the regulatory environment in Australia around the banking industry was definitely not cut out for mobile payments back then. And also it was a bit of a cartel-like environment too. So, we decided that we would pretty much jump out of that, and at the same time kind of burning along in all the copious amounts of spare time we seem to have. We had been continuing with kind of R&D in the AR space, which was really awesome. So our team really took our kind of mobile payments platform and pivoted that and turned it into a development platform to enable other people to develop content and experiences on. So at that time, the iPhone, so it was 2007, the iPhone had been released, so people were pretty excited about mobile. And the first kind of wave of mobile AR apps or browsers were being released, so things like Geneo and Layer. So Layer ended up being bought by another company called Blipper, and Mateo, who is the company behind Geneo, were acquired by Apple, and their team really became the kind of founding team behind what we now see as ARKit, or Apple's kind of core AR technology as well. So these kind of mobile browser apps, or AR browser apps at the time, only really supported developers creating content for them. So we know that, or we kind of saw that we wanted to be that platform that allowed anybody to create content for those browser apps just by drag and dropping. So we started with geolocation AR, kind of think Pokemon Go type of things, or wayfinding around spaces. And then once they started supporting image AR, so being able to recognise images in the real world, overlay content and interaction on them, we started to support that. But all our team had really come from that web background as well, and we were super passionate about it. So we had this crazy idea that AR should work in the web. Totally crazy back then. And I think I've seen Scott in the room, and he's probably going, yep, crazy folk. So we really started trying to work with the browser vendors, so Mozilla and Chrome, and different standards organisations to really implement a standards-based approach to supporting AR and web browsers on kind of any device. And like we were really quickly learning, nothing happens as quickly as you think it does. So while this was going on, we kind of transitioned what had been our kind of mobile apps browser content management system to OR, so really wanted it to be all completely web-based. So from both a creation and a consumption perspective. So what we wanted to do was remove friction for people both in creation and consumption. So from a consumer's perspective, you shouldn't need to download an app, you should just be able to go to a URL, automatically the device that you're on is recognised, the browser is recognised, and the capabilities, the context and the form factor of those are recognised, and the experience just adapts to all of those. So you don't have that stop, download an app, figure out where you're going, sometimes sign up in a first use process and then get back to where you were. So it meant that for creatives, for publishers, for media producers, they could suddenly just push people into this space and integrate it within their own branded websites and campaign sites. And so again, we started with location-based AR, and a lot of that was because at the time, Apple didn't allow Safari access to the device camera. So after that, 3 years ago, when they finally did with iOS 11, we launched we're the first people in the world to launch image recognition in the web, which was pretty exciting. And I guess, yeah, from all perspectives, it certainly wasn't easy. It was challenging, and we definitely questioned ourselves at the time. I think a lot of people in the industry thought we were fairly crazy and, kind of heretics. And I know that, the only thing that kept us going a lot of that time, because it did take a long time, was that we'd had that core vision and stuck to it. And I think back then as well, from a kind of funding perspective, AR and VR from a commercial sense, we're kind of talking back in, kind of 2012, was still fairly immature. And then we were kind of these crazy people coming in saying, yeah, but we want to do it on the web as well, so come and fund us. So people were just like, no, I don't think so. The ones that were really interested wanted us to move to the Valley. And I'd been travelling a lot, I'd lived in the States, I'd refound my roots back in Australia, so I didn't want to go anywhere. So we kind of had this firm belief that we should, as Australians, be able to have a global business. Why do we have to pick up everything that we have here or leave it and move to the States to be successful or to build a company? So we kind of made a commitment at that time that we'd really focus on creating a sustainable business with revenue and just to grow our customer base. So that's pretty much what we did. One of the big changes that we made that I think really resonated with a lot of the creative community, and especially advertisers and publishers, was that we allow them to completely white label their experiences. So it means that our brand is completely hidden and they can just build everything on top of our platform and own it themselves, which has been phenomenal for us in terms of growth over the last 12 months since we made that decision. one of the really interesting things is that we've got less than probably 0.5% of our customer base is in Australia. So I think I was saying to Linda, it's, you feel like you're jet lagged the whole time because you're working across multiple time zones, and our team is distributed around the world as well. So it's an interesting challenge, it's a really fun challenge, but I'm kind of a hermit a lot of the time, just trying to keep up with that. So a few, I think, top takeaways that I've had, or I've got from my time kind of in the industry and evolving through the industry is, well, I guess one of them is having the name Alex. So especially up until about 5 years ago, the amount of times I rocked up to meetings and people would be floored because they were expecting a man to rock up. They were all, well, mostly all pretty lovely about it, but it did lead to some really interesting encounters when you weren't what people had expected. And I think as well, I've been really privileged to work with a lot of really talented women and men throughout my career, and I've learned something from each and every one of them. And I think, it is challenging for women in STEM and technology, or there's that perception that it is. And like Chantal was saying, there's a lot of reasons women don't get into technology. And I know that there is still some misogyny around, but by far and large, I've had nothing but kind of support from every one of the men that have been part of my career and kind of, input into that. So that's awesome. And I think, like I said, the best decision that we made was to go global. So it doesn't work for every company, but for us it really did, because it enabled us to figure out how we were going to scale and how we were going to be there for a broad audience. And one of those things was that we have automated a lot. And with machine learning growing as well and implementing that into our platform, like that really is leading to some really exciting developments as well. And I think the other thing too is we have a saying that kind of gets rolled out every few months when we come to a bit of a fork in our road, and that's every form of capital has a cost. And I'm not talking about just the kind of dollar capital. And it's just you don't know what it is until it happens. And I think for us that's been really key from a decision-making process at many points through our journey. So I think at this stage, where I'm at in my immersive journey, I feel like I'm almost coming back to the beginning, and some of the things that Kate was talking about and showing you where we're at now. Things are happening so quickly. I feel like we're in this exciting time where you're on the cusp of a whole other phase of, immersion and kind of spatial computing as well. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's amazing technology that your organisation's working on, and I believe I've seen it in a couple of instances throughout Sydney at some local festivals as well. It's really quite exciting. Our final speaker this evening, and I really hope you are all thinking of those questions now, is Rita, and I am about to ruin your surname.
You're going to kill it, Arico.
Arico, thank you for not allowing me to do that. Chief Digital Advisor at Microsoft and Advisory Board Member at the Institute for Drone Technology. Rita's going to come up and share some absolutely amazing information with you, and I'm going to change a video.
Thank you.
That is.
Well, it's very exciting to be here. I love having my own technician. Thank you. So my name is Rita Rigo. I'm a digital advisor at Microsoft, and I work with enterprise customers in helping them to take advantage of emerging technology ranging from mixed reality, IoT, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. And it's really about trying to figure out how to get value out of these technologies. But lately I've become extremely obsessed with mixed reality. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So when I graduated from uni, when I originally did engineering, coming from a girls' school, it was a bit of a shock. Turning up at engineering and there was 5 girls and 1,000 guys, it was kind of exciting at first, having been starved of men. But yeah, so I quickly kind of really got into it, and it was a double degree as engineering and computing. At that stage, the PC had just evolved. So, I had my own 286, and, I had floppy disks that went inside this 286. I had all this, really high-powered computing. And I ended up graduating, and I spent a lot of time in PC support because, you know, that's what happens when you know PCs and everyone else is living in the mainframe world. And then I quickly moved into a sales role because I can talk, as you can see, right? And so I could communicate unlike a lot of other technical people. So it kind of eventuated into this world where I knew a lot about PCs, and then the internet was born. I remember being, I don't know, 1990 something, and seeing my first version of Netscape throbbing at me. And it was one of the most exciting days of my life, seeing that browser. And so I had to go work in the internet industry. So I ended up working for ISPs, and then I worked for telcos. I hung around Telstra when the big pond was born, before they called it the internet. And I also started a radio show on Triple R, which is our community radio show called Bite Into It, which was about trying to help people reduce techno fear. Because I think people still have a bit of that. And actually at the moment, it's now almost cool to be a tech geek. But, you know, I really felt like I didn't want people to miss out on the benefits of technology. And I think I'm still doing that. You know, there's still so much we can learn from technology and embracing it and making it part of our lives and not being scared of it. So that was what the radio show was about, but it led me to then move more into consulting and now my role at Microsoft. So the story I'm trying to tell you is that, okay, so we started with the PC and then we moved to the smartphone, and like, you know, we really stopped thinking about the PC. It's all about the smartphone, it's all about apps. It's all about, you know, what can I scan on my phone? What can I do? What app can I download? Where's the latest version of Tinder? You know, like where's Grindr? Like it's all there, right? But I believe that mixed reality is the next next wave. So, you know, it's, I don't know if you've seen some of the pictures already. This is actually a friend of mine, Mikola Jade, who is looking at using mixed reality to preserve Indigenous culture. So she's using the HoloLens, which is a computer you wear on your head, as well as a whole lot of phone apps that allow you to bring to life 60,000-year-old cave drawings in Kakadu. And she's exceptional because, you know, she's an Indigenous lady working with technology, and these kind of things are so exciting for women because it's not just about the guys. I love this because this is a story about our mixed reality studio. So I was lucky enough to be in your green room today, but in the US we have a mixed reality studio where you can actually go in and scan yourself, and we can create a clone of you in mixed reality. You saw it earlier with our product manager on stage. So we've done Ashley Graham, we've done a NASA astronaut, and I think it's amazing to imagine what's possible in that space and what we can do as we kind of enter this world of mixed reality. This is actually an Australian invention. You saw previously there was a girl playing with a very complicated construction. So this was come out of RMIT University, where they believe that we are designing things that are too difficult to construct. But using the world of spatial computing, you can actually create a digital grid so that you can actually see what's going on and construct it without all the complex strings and different physical models that you previously knew. And you can have that world happening in 3D. We're looking at doing a whole lot of work around working with Indigenous elders and putting them through the mixed reality studio so that we can start to maintain some of their cultures and have them forever with their languages, etc., and start to find ways that we can maintain the languages as well using artificial intelligence. So I think I've told you a little bit about why I love mixed reality. It's the next wave. It allows us to see the unseen, and I think we saw a little bit of that in your video where, like, you can imagine that this is actually the studio where you go in and clone yourself to a certain extent, but it does create these really high resolution versions of people which you can then take into mixed reality. And I think I also showed you at the beginning the mixed reality version 2, which allows us to have the complete scanning of your hand so that when you're touching holograms, you actually touch them and pull them. And it was really interesting because last year I had my own HoloLens, and every time I'd lend it to someone, people would look at the holograms and go like this. And like, you couldn't really do that. All you could do is like pinch them and move them, but with the new hand movement on it, you can actually drag them, pull them, move them around, and it becomes so much more natural. And that was actually the UX design that was done by an amazing woman called Julia Swartz. So there's a lot of women working in mixed reality, ranging from architects, UX designers, Indigenous women, looking at preserving technology around that space, and also being able to create new versions of themselves as well. But I've gone really fast. I don't know if I've got much more time left. I'm happy to take your questions later on to talk a little bit more about what's going on in these areas. But I really do think that one day we're probably not going to have a smartphone anymore. We might have smart glasses or smart contact lenses or smart devices that will allow us to see the world in a way that we haven't been able to see it before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. We're just going to quickly rejig our stage so that I can put some seats up for these wonderful women to come up here. I hope you're all thinking of your questions and what you want to ask. My microphone's off. There we go. Unfortunately, Kate does have a flight she had to make because she was such an amazing resident of the studio and agreed to come in at such last minute. She does have to run off to a flight. But we do have two of our amazing speakers, Alex and Rita, here, who are open to your questions. Are there questions in our audience? If you'll just wait 2 seconds for the microphone to get to you.
Hello, my name is Katie and I work in innovation at Westpac, and I've just got a very open question to both of you. And I guess it's along the lines of the Instagram posts. You know, do you declare if it's a sponsored post or do you declare it's an authentic post? And my concern, I guess, over AR and VR is the ethics around it. That what do you think is going to happen in the industry about declaring, are you actually interacting with a digital avatar or is it a human?
I work with big corporates, so we're doing a lot of work around the whole fake news issue because it is going to be quite real in terms of you're going to have to kind of like being back in grade 2 where you have that class where they said, okay, there's bias in everything. So what you read here might not be real and you have to be able to figure it out yourself. And I think that's part of us becoming more mature digital citizens as well, to be able to understand what's real and what's not. And there's going to be some real work done around that. We're doing a lot of work around identifying fakes and making sure that news is real. But I really do think, some of the most successful digital avatars, they don't muck around telling you that they're real. They tell you they're a digital avatar, which I think is the most exciting thing because they're actually telling you the truth. And I think we will be much, much better at being able to identify this as we mature and become different digital kind of experiences.
But whose responsibility do you think it is to declare that? Do you think we have to interpret that they're digital, or do you think it should be declared?
Look, I think if it is regulated in that way, it comes down to the government and policy and regulation. But I don't believe that most governments in the world can move quickly enough to keep up with the rate of change at the moment. And I think it's something that is not just for the AR and VR industry, it is across technology, as we said. And I think it's a huge challenge for society. Yeah, and I think part of it too is that you've got to ensure that you've got equity at every point as well. So as Rita says, people will become more digitally mature, but that's not necessarily all of our audiences either. So, yeah.
But I do think it's the social media platforms as well, the platforms that you use, that are going to become much more scrutinised. Pleasure. Great question.
Hi, thank you for that. My name's Henry from Run Hunters. Particularly from an exploration and navigation perspective, where are we at around wearables, as in you mentioned contact lenses and glasses, and what's hype versus reality of where that sort of those devices are currently?
Well, I work for Microsoft. We've got a product in market. It's actually our second version, which is the HoloLens 2. And we've got a lot of corporates buying them. replacing fleets of different types of technology so that they can kind of do that remote assistance, or they can do deep surgery, or they can do deep fixing of machinery. So there's lots and lots of applications in which people are purchasing the HoloLens, but it's not quite a consumer device yet. So it's kind of like, I suppose, when the PC first came out. I was a geek, I had one, I did engineering, but not everybody had one.
And are they shrinking over time? Because obviously, wearables at the moment, they're clunky, you can't, they might be attached, you can't really do anything with it. But if you wanted to go out, as in, to move a long way or run with it or explore or get into, the wilderness, wearing something that gives you a heads-up display of where you're going and the information you need, are they shrinking? Is that the trend? They're getting smaller and smaller?
Smaller, lighter. So the first one we did was quite heavy and a really small field of view, but amazing sound. So you could have this amazing surround sound. And now the new one we've got has got a much bigger field of view, much lighter, much longer battery life. It's got a flip so that you can be wandering around and flip it. So yeah, it's definitely, and it's really interesting to me because I always thought technology was about software, but it's making technology more about hardware every day. So I find that really fascinating that it is the hardware advancements that are going to take that leap.
And I think from Microsoft's point of view, they can be in it for the long haul, which is, I think that's an amazing position to be in. But what we've also seen is, hundreds, if not thousands, of other hardware developers for wearable devices, kind of starting probably, a decade or so ago and playing in this space. And what we've started, and spending hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars, what we've started seeing over the last 12 to 18 months is a lot of those companies actually folding or being acquired by some of the bigger companies. I think that shift now, and a lot of new companies coming to fill the void, but I think that shift is showing a more maturing market as well. You're starting to see companies that have traditionally been in the optics area now starting to come into this hardware area as well. So I think now we're going to see a much quicker, kind of iterative approach to this hardware. And
only Facebook's going to launch something because they've been acquiring lots of different companies, and so it's definitely a race to see what hardware we're going to have.
We have a question from our online stream, which is much down the same path, which is, what is the current adoption rate and how do you see this progressing?
So, Gartner has some stats around this, and it's all around, at the moment it's very about the knowledge worker and, people, the blue-collar worker, who are really taking it on. And then the next phase is going to be around more that education, doctors, that side of things, and then the consumer evolution. So it is, Gartner's predicting this 5-year cycle as we kind of get more and more hardware devices in this space, and much more different variety of what's possible.
I think if you look at some of the statistical stats around the hardware space in particular, and generally, in the VR space, really, we're looking at the moment, and the mixed reality space, you can see that there has been a tendency over the last 5 to 6 years to wildly overestimate where they actually end up. I always love kind of going back and seeing, the stats based on their predictions. And but I think, we are starting to see now that, they're lowering that and that the actual numbers are starting to increase as well as hardware evolves, becomes cheaper. And also, we're moving from that really tethered environment into an untethered environment, and being able to move through spaces with more freedom as well.
Yeah.
In terms of adaptation, like more directed to you, you, as we can see, you change your career many times and then you have to adapt. What is the tips you can give to us to learn how to adapt and then move on in your career and then not being left down? So that, I think, it's something that is very important for this new world. We need to adapt, and then most of people don't know how to do. So can you tell us a little bit about some tips you can give to us?
Yeah, sure. For what they're worth. I think part of it is that don't underestimate the experience and the skills that you already have. And that being able to take those core skills and just adapt them and apply them to a new context. And I think, in the technology world, and, Rita came from an engineering background, and, I definitely, studied coding and things like that, and was a coder for a while. You don't, to be a technologist, you don't have to be a programmer, and I think that's a really fundamental thing as well. I think one of the biggest things that you can take to being someone working in the technology realm is empathy, is being able to say, this is my audience, what are we building, what's our goal, who's going to be using it, how are they going to use it, and that should be the domain of everyone on your team. And I don't think that you need to have a technical background for that. You've got to have a background of being curious and really trying to understand how you can create solutions for people, in varying contexts and of varying abilities or capabilities as well. There's kind of and learn something new every day is the other thing.
Empathy is amazing, but I found as everything's changing all the time, I was stuck in the web world and I wanted to learn about other things like AI and different IoT. I found that if you attend these kind of events, meetups, hackathons, anything that takes you out of your comfort zone to be able to learn new things, it's the best way is to have that hands-on experience. So I didn't know what blockchain was. I went to a blockchain hackathon. It was just 2 days of amazing, intense behavior, but you can even sometimes win money as well. And meet new people. So I highly recommend anyone who asks me for career advice, get yourself to as many meetups and hackathons as you can, because that's the way you kind of pick up all that new stuff.
I'll give you the microphone next, yes? Okay. Hi, my name's Irene. I help women create the sound of equality. I'm the CEO of a music publishing company. We publish podcast music, so if anybody's creating podcasts, come and say hi. Quick plug. My question is around digital literacy for people in the bush. I'm a ratbag from the country. So I'm interested in your thoughts as businesswomen and as creatives from a creative background. What do you see working to kind of reduce techno fear? And what have you seen working to kind of help close that gap between regional and urban, or what's happening in some of these bigger spaces?
I think there's a lot of gaming going on in the country. I'm really finding the kind of agricultural IoT kind of stuff that's really driving a lot of the interest in that space. A lot of that do-it-yourself, chicken coop that you can control with your mobile. A lot of those kind of things are really driving people wanting to know how tech works. And in terms of digital literacy, I also think it's breaking down that distance and being part of, really building your social network. And I'm finding that, people in the country are amazing at that. I'm not trying to divide it, but, I have a friend who comes from Ballarat, and she's permanently on social media, so she always knows what's kind of going on. So I think getting involved is definitely something that's really amazing, to be more connected in that way, because it really reduces the tyranny of distance.
Has Microsoft got some good things happening in that space? Are you coming out the bush?
We're doing a lot of work in Kakadu at the moment, as you saw. I'm sure we've got lots of retail outlets and lots of different ways that we can engage in the regional areas. Lots of educational stuff that's going on in that space. Lots of investment in libraries, hospitals, those kind of things.
From my perspective, and I've travelled a lot around kind of regional New South Wales and Victoria regions in the last kind of 12 to 18 months, doing a lot of work with education and in the school system. But really in all of those towns, you see the real difference between towns that are using libraries as hubs and community hubs, which I think is unbelievably important, and those that don't. The other thing that they're all crying out for is a decent, I could swear here, but a decent network. It is not too much. It shouldn't be too much to expect that in this day and age. And, I think when we're in cities, we actually don't realise the impact that it has to people. We take it for granted. I moved out of Sydney 5 years ago. I moved just a little bit north of Wollongong, and I was getting on DSL about 2 megabits down, and it was killing me trying to run a business. It's only in the last 2 years that we have got NBN, and we're lucky to have a node sitting right outside our front gate, which is incredible. And because everyone doesn't want to spend on NBN, we're the only ones using it, so it's pretty awesome. So I can't complain. But we're private node. We're really, really, really lucky, and I think you do take it for granted when you do have it, and you don't realise the impact when you don't. So yeah, I think that is critical, and yeah.
Amazing investment Australia's made in NBN. Maybe slow, but it's coming. Anyway, I know you're dying to ask a question. Yeah. There's people up the back.
Thank you. My question is about mixed reality. I just want to know what is based on any criteria, and is it any criteria how far you can go, and what is your target? What's the pros and cons of mixed reality? Because any technology we have has got these pros and cons. So I just want to know the risks involved with this one, because some people are using it in not the correct way.
When I first started wearing my HoloLens 1, it was a little uncomfortable after a couple of hours. But I think as they've evolved, it's become more comfortable. And just watching a lot of the studies around, people finding the immersive experience so much more valuable than the screen, in being able to absorb information and being able to have more adaptive content that, adapts itself to you. So there's a lot of advantages. In terms of disadvantages, I can imagine that it would have some effect on people because, it does cut you off from the rest of the world, I suppose, but I haven't really experienced anyone having virtual reality addiction yet. Have you? I think you come out of the world. So have you used much virtual reality yourself or mixed reality?
I haven't used mixed reality, but virtual reality I've used.
Yeah, because you're more blacked out, you're kind of in that world, so it does sometimes give you a bit of vertigo, but you just kind of go off to another world. I've seen people use it for all kinds of hypnotic and different kind of meditational techniques to kind of reduce things like fear of spiders, all kinds of fears by it being in that kind of more virtual reality thing. But mixed reality is kind of different because it's see-through, and so you're still getting light, but you still get holograms in front of you. So I don't know. I'd have to work with it, and it'd have to be out there a lot more to understand the disadvantages a little bit more.
Control, like standard control for that, how far you want to go. Like, okay, this is enough. We don't go further than that,
I think it depends on the context and the experience itself, and the content and the purpose and the goal that you're trying to achieve. And again, it's a new computing paradigm that's being introduced, and I think it's in that, while it's been around for absolutely decades, it's really just coming into the kind of commercial space at the moment and kind of the consumer consciousness. So I think we're at that point where people are playing with that and pushing it and really seeing where it can go. And I think as hardware and as content matures as well, you're going to see, exactly like we saw with computers and with phones and things too, you're going to see that it's far more acceptable and people will just start using it for more than they ever would have thought they would have used it for. Yeah.
Hello. I have a question. I was chatting, I don't know if you've heard of the VR company Survios. They came up with 2 games. They're actually they started out from research at the University of Southern California, and now they have like a huge studio in Los Angeles, and they make VR games. And one of my favorite games from them is Raw Data that I've played at a VR arcade. But one thing I was chatting to the community manager about was they are struggling, well, not them, but I think this is the major challenge with a lot of companies that just make VR games is trying to get as many people, or like trying to sell the hardware to as many people as possible so that those people can then play their games. How, or like, what are you guys doing to help these people?
example, like in Australia, our distributors are people like JB Hi-Fi, Officeworks. I want to be able to walk in there and see a display of mixed reality headsets and try them all on and buy one. But like that doesn't exist. So I think it's really about driving that demand so that I want to get one for Christmas. I don't have my own mixed reality headset because there's the difference between the HoloLens that I showed, and then there's headsets that you can plug into your computer, or also headsets that you can put your mobile phone in. So these devices are quite, there's a lot of them around, but it's really hard to get your hands on them. It's really hard. Like you look at somewhere like, I do a lot of work with ACME in Melbourne, which is the Australian Centre of the Moving Image. And they commissioned a whole lot of amazing VR art, and you go and see it, and there's one person, one device, and 65 people queuing up to have 15 minutes with the device. So it's like there is a hardware shortage, and they're still quite hard to buy, and they're hard to demonstrate. And I think and you'll see people trying to set up VR arcades where you can kind of when they first had the internet, remember the internet cafe, $6 for a few minutes of internet? I'm imagining something like that could happen, or it's gonna get so cheap, we're just all gonna buy them ourselves.
I think that's it too. We're in that phase where, these devices will become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And in a really short period of time. But you're in a catch-22 at the moment going content, hardware, kind of, which is going to prop up the other one, and they both really are. So it's
Okay, we've got one last question.
One more question, unfortunately. There are 7 hands that have just gone up, so I will let Carol select the last one. I'm so sorry. You will have time afterwards during the networking.
Talking of content, hardware, and the third area is actually broadband access. So we've talked about how Australia, we have challenges. Can you give us an example of somewhere? Okay, so I have a good friend, who says to me, the village I grew up in Serbia, we have much better access than you have here in Bondi. So can you give an example of other places in the world where they do have really great broadband, of what is possible?
Our team is distributed around the world, so every day I have this thing. So, literally everyone has better network access than we do. Because our platform delivers content, so people create on our platform for their customers, they deliver that content via the web, so network is key. We do have a content distribution network, so that absolutely speeds up content delivery. We've got offline modes, that type of thing. But basically, people, just want to be able to use it and use it quickly. What we're seeing from a content perspective is something that I saw in the web, a couple of decades ago, which was where when you were creating content for the web, so images, videos, whatever, you would largely take them from, you'd have designers that were coming from print media, and they were trying to create images for the web, and they were creating these, crazy large, they were 200K JPEGs back then, which we all go, whatever now, but back then it was massive. And so it was an education process to teach people to really optimize content for that delivery method to help. What we're seeing now on our platform is people will go, right, I'm uploading 3D content, and a lot of the 3D content in stock libraries is made for film or television out of the box. And the people using that don't know any better, and they will upload 100 and 200 and 300 meg, objects, 3D objects, and then expect them to work on, via delivery onto a web browser and wonder why they don't. So that kind of process of education, or just that process of having the ability to automatically readapt that type of content, and then, I think that's really important. And for me, things like 5G coming is going to absolutely speed up adoption and make it far more accessible for people. Yeah.
I've just got a 5G phone, and I think it's awesome. like it's better at airports, South Bank, Docklands. So, 5G is really going to drive a lot of that kind of stuff. Don't believe all that stuff about how it's going to kill us, because it's not true. That's another piece of fake news. But yeah, 5G is probably going to provide a lot more of that leapfrog capability for us. We're done. Should we take one more, or we're done?
We unfortunately don't have any time for any more. Can you all please put your hands together and thank our wonderful speakers? I'd like to also thank all of you for joining us this evening for our Studio Women's Network. We will have one more at the end of this year in November. Thank you everyone also for joining us online. I didn't see any other questions, but it's been wonderful having you as well. Those here in the room, please join us in the other room for more networking, drinks, and please feel free to chat with the ladies. They will be staying a little bit longer. Thank you.